Cool. Okay, so welcome to freeCodeCamp OKC. We're here in Starspace 46, so we want to give them a shout out, as well as Techlahoma for sponsoring us. So my name is Carson McKinstry. We're going to talk about how to build a portfolio. And so we're going to do sort of the quick and dirty. Let's get something on the page, use Bootstrap, make it look really stock, and then you can go ahead and change things later on. So a couple things we'll need. So we're going to need Bootstrap. So we'll actually be using a content delivery network for that. We also need jQuery. We'll also be using a CDN for that. So one of the optional things that we're going to be using, this is just to not freak you out when you see one line of code and then it turns into 7. We're going to be using a technology called Emmett. Whoops, where'd it go? So just a little bit of a note on Emmett. So it's a code completion tool. So you type out this interesting syntax and then it immediately turns into code. It comes prepackaged in VS Code. You can still use it. Apparently, I was just told that using tab to complete the code doesn't work anymore. Sucks. The syntax is pretty simple. So you've got your tag name followed by a dot and then your class, and then the octothorpe plus your ID, and then the attributes inside of square brackets. Curly brackets are going to be any sort of inner text. You're going to have an arrow for any child tags, and then a plus sign for any sibling tags. So in practice, we've got this A button primary, it's got an href, and then it's got some inner text, and that's what it becomes. So these are our components. So a couple weeks ago, Daniel talked to everyone about sort of some of the components we're going to have on a portfolio site. So you need a navigation bar, you might want a Jumbotron with sort of a welcome message, a section for your projects, a section for your contact info, a section for any skills you want to say, these are the things that I work with, as well as any social media links you want. So pretty quick for that. So we're actually going to just go ahead and dive on into it. Ignore the app.js. So we're going to start with our boilerplate. So you've got our meta tags like normal. We've got a style .css file. You've got an app.js file. I'll show you that real quick just so you're not confused. So what this all does, you don't necessarily need it, but I like it. It actually adds smooth scrolling to any links on your page. So say you link to another place on the page, it's going to automatically make it so that it doesn't jump. So let's start by pulling in Bootstrap. So we're going to go to Bootstrap CDN, bootstrapcdn.com. And this will bring us up a nice, fun little page. What we need is the CSS for this, and we're going to need the JavaScript. So you're going to copy the HTML from, oh, by the way, we are using Bootstrap version 3. Version 4 came out a couple weeks ago. I haven't actually touched version 4 at all. I've heard it's very different from 3. So we're going to stick with 3 for now. So we'll go ahead and drop this link tag in. Whoops. And then we also need to grab the JavaScript for Bootstrap. And so we'll place this down at the bottom of the page. Make that not so big. And then I said the last thing we need is going to be jQuery. So that is going to be at code.jquery.com. I don't believe the version matters, but we're just going to go ahead and grab the minified version of 3.2. So we'll copy that code and plop it in. So that's pretty simple for now. So that's just going to be your boilerplate. Not much there. We could add a title here if we wanted to. Oops. Title. can spell. So this is where Emmett comes in handy. So my portfolio. Okay, so Bootstrap is really nice. One of the things that we can do is we can actually just copy and paste a lot of their code into what we're working on. So the website for that is actually getbootstrap.com. And we'll want to make sure to switch it to version 3, so 3.3.7. And what we're looking for is actually going to be the components page. So if you'll remember, the first thing on our list is a navigation bar. So Bootstrap has one of these already. It's called a nav bar. And this is what it looks like. Can you guys see that? Yeah. That's what it looks like. And then this is the code for it. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and copy and paste all this into our body. Now, let's go check out what this looks like at this point. We're going to take this, we're going to drop it into Google Chrome. And it's pretty simple so far. We've got all this extra stuff on there. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get rid of that. Okay, so let's start. So half of the time when you're learning code is going to be reading somebody else's code, making sure it works, debugging it, pulling things out that you don't need, so on and so forth. So this is the perfect example of stuff that we just don't need. So I don't particularly like that it spans the entire screen. So typically with Bootstrap themes, you'll see the nav bar being cut off on either side, so they've got a gutter. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. So that's this container fluid class. Just changing that to container is going to do that for us. So the next thing, so we don't need any of these drop downs. So you see we've got this drop down class drop downs. We can delete that. And actually all of these things on the left-hand side, so you'll see up here is where it says nav bar nav. Good majority of this we can keep. But we don't need this link. We also don't need this link. Actually, we can just get rid of this entire section right here. Let's see, what else can we get rid of? So there's another drop-down we don't need. So we're gonna right align all of our navigation. So we'll have 3 links here. We'll have one for, let's say, our projects. We'll have one for our skills. And then one for our contact area. So what I'm going to do here, so inside of an A tag, you can actually link to another portion on the page by giving it an ID, or the ID of where you want to scroll to. So here we'll do this projects, skills, and let's simplify this just to contact. And then the last thing with the nav bar, if we'll scroll up, let's see. So we've got this nav bar brand. So this is going to be up in the top left-hand corner. It's going to be sort of where you can put an icon there. You can put in text, pretty much anything you want. I'm just going to go ahead and do carsonmckinstry.com. So we'll save that, and let's see what it looks like. Oh, there's actually an input in here. So the other thing on here that I wanted to get rid of, so there's this form. Basically, that would be for like a search field. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that as well. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like now. So real quick, we've got my brand there on the left-hand side. We've got these 3 links on the right-hand side. Pretty simple. So the next thing we need, so let's go ahead and collapse this so we're not cluttering the code. So the next thing we need is a Jumbotron. So Jumbotron with a sort of welcome message. So unfortunately, they don't really have a good copy and paste solution for this, but it's pretty simple. So we need a Jumbotron. So I've done period plus the class name, and I hit tab, and it will automatically put in the divs. So we need a Jumbotron, and because I want it to span the entire page, I want it to do like an entire top bar, so kind of like a hero image, if you're aware of what those are. That's what that is. So with that, so inside the Jumbotron, we're going to have an H1. We're just going to do the programmer's normal, so hello world. And then I also want there to be a paragraph, and we're just going to do the lorem ipsum. So we've now got an H1 and a paragraph tag, and then the last thing we want is we want some buttons. So typically, so for a call to action button, you want, say, let's have this go down to your projects. So we're going to do href is equal to, I guess, let's start with classes. So a.button primary. And then we're going to do our href down to our project section. And we'll say learn more. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Pretty meh at the moment. Oh, pardon me. So the other thing we need inside of this is actually going to be a container. So Bootstrap works on a grid system. And when I say grid system, so you have a container, you have a row, and then you have these columns on the inside of that, and you lay out your stuff with that. What this container does, it will actually give you a good gutter on either side so that it's not just all across a single page. So let me actually show you what that looks like. So now it sort of lines up with our nav bar. So one of the things that we want to do, so we've got this weird gap in between the Jumbotron and the navigation bar. We want to get rid of that, as well as we want to make the Jumbotron just a little bit bigger. So we'll actually go into our style.css. So let's start with the Jumbotron. So the Jumbotron, so pretty much all the styles in Bootstrap you can overwrite yourself. You just have to sort of figure out how to do it, and it just takes some trial and error to do this. So we're going to, I want this to be 500 pixels high, and I want it to be, everything to be aligned to the middle of that div. So let's do a height of 500 pixels. I'm going to use some Flexbox magic, so just like flex, and then align items center. And that will center everything, give it a bigger Jumbotron, and then everything is centered on the horizontal axis, or vertical axis, pardon me. Now the other thing we need to get rid of is this weird gap. Can you guys see that gap? Probably not. I can see it, and it bothers me. So what we'll do, it's actually on the nav bar, and it's actually going to be the margin bottom selector. So margin bottom, and we want to set that to 0. And you see it moved up a little bit. So the next thing we want is we're going to create a section for our projects. So what we'll do, I'm very much a proponent of semantic HTML. So we're going to use a section tag, and we're going to give it the ID of projects. So the next thing we need is that container again. So .container. And then we also need a row. So the row is how we will actually lay out everything. It's what those columns that we're going to create here in a second are going to sort of snap to. And that didn't work the way I wanted it to do. Okay. Okay, so we need two things. We need sort of we also need a, let's give it a header of, let's say, projects just for now. So we need two things, and then we'll actually make the header. We're actually going to go ahead and align that to the center. Bootstrap has an awesome class for that. It's just text center. So for each of our projects, we need two things. We need a screenshot of what the app looks like, as well as a title, a description, and some links to what it is. So let's start with the left-hand side. So we're going to do column medium 6, what that does. So Bootstrap is split up into 12 columns, and you do 6 columns to span half the page, or half of those columns. And then we'll also give, for later on, we're going to go ahead and give this an app image, and then, app image wrapper, because we'll need to play with that here in a little bit. So so I was going to have kittens for our placeholder images. Unfortunately, my favorite placeholder site doesn't work anymore. So what we're going to use is a site called Lorem Pixel. So we need an image, and our href is going to be http lorempixel.com / and then this is going to take two things. It's going to take a width and a height. So 300 by 200. And let's see what that looks like now. And I've given the wrong, did I do the wrong? Let's find out where this goes. Okay, so it should. That's what I meant. Thank you. Lorem Pixel / 300 / 200. Go and reload the page. Maybe. We'll get there eventually. Live coding, it's always a fun time. Okay, so there we go. We've got a picture on there. And then the other thing we need is we're going to do another column, medium 6. And this is going to be app description. And inside of that, we want let's do an H2, or I guess an H3 as the name of our app. So clever title. And then we also need a description. So let's do the lorem ipsum again. And then we need two links. So we need a link to our app. So if you've got it live somewhere, say on Heroku or on GitHub, you want a link to it. And you also might want a link to the source code if it's an open source project. So we need a.button primary. And this will be href. We're just going to basically redirect it to the current page. And then we're going to say view the app. Then we also need another one. So a.button primary. href is equal to that. And then you can type in, say, source code. So let me show you what that looks like now. So pretty simple, pretty very borderline of what you need, very basic of what you need on a portfolio. So you need some sort of hello thing and then a section for your projects. So the other thing is I don't particularly like the fact that the image isn't centered. So it's not centered with anything else on the page or anything else on that row. So what we'll do, we'll go into our styles again. So this is where that image wrapper, app image wrapper class comes in handy. If I can type. And we're going to do display flex again. Use some magic align items, center, and then align, or I guess justify content. Again, center. So what this will do is actually, it'll take up whatever area you've got, it'll split it in half both ways, and then put whatever image you want right, or whatever you're wanting right in the middle of that. So we'll go ahead and reload the page. And you can see it's now pretty much in the center of where we want it to be. Now, so I don't have just one project, so let's do 3-ish projects. Let's go ahead and do 3. So we'll take this div that says row, and we want to make 3 rows with this. So what we'll do is we'll copy and paste this code 2 more times. And then just so we can see different images, let's do 250 by 150, and then let's do 400 by 300. One of the things we want to also add to these images is we also want to add a class. Actually, we'll be adding 2 classes, one from Bootstrap and one of our own. So the first one is going to be image responsive, IMG responsive, pardon me. And then we'll just do app image. So what that will do, what image responsive does is as you resize the screen, the image resizes with it. What we will also do with this app image is go ahead and give it a standard height. So with those Lorem pixel images, they all come out with different heights and different widths. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that the height is pretty much the same so it doesn't screw off our layout any. So let's give it a height of 200 pixels for all of them. And we'll take a look at what that looks like. So we've now got our 3 projects. Actually, let's move the H2 out of those real quick. And we'll just put that right inside of the container. It's outside of the parent container. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So we've got projects, we've got the clever titles, we've got the app images. Problem is, each of those things looks a little weird. It looks a little squashed. So what we need to do, we need to go ahead and add some margins to each of these rows. So let's give the row another class. So let's say app row. So we can go back into our styles and say .app row. And let's give it a margin of 36 pixels. I like numbers divisible by 12 because they're easy for my brain to deal with without a calculator. Let's show you what that looks like. So we now got a little bit of space, more space on the page. It also looks like these links are a little bit weird, or a little bit wonky. They're way too close together. So what we can actually do, let's go ahead and target the first link in each of those. Whoops. And we'll just give it let's just do app link. Go back over to our CSS.app link. And we're going to give it a margin right of, let's say 12 pixels. Let's see how that looks. We can play with it a little bit later. So we've got a little bit of space. We've got some pictures, we've got titles, we've got a description, and we've got the links to each of the apps. So the next thing that we need, let's go ahead and do our skills section. So the skills section is a little bit more, it's not as much boilerplate code that you would get from Bootstrap. So what I did before this, I went ahead and I went online, got a couple logo images, just some of the stuff that I work on normally. And so they're just in my images folder. I don't know if you can see any of that. Can you guys read that? Yeah, so you see here I've got CSS3, Facebook, GitHub, HTML5, and a couple others. So in our markup, let's go ahead and close the project section. Let's start a new section with the ID of skills. Now we also need the container in there as well, again. That's just to keep everything sort of aligned properly. And then within the same class as that container, we'll go ahead and do the skills section as another class, because we'll need that here in a moment. So for this, all we really need is we need our H2 to say this section is called skills. And we need 4 images. So source is going to be images/html5. Can't remember. So let's open up our images. html5.svg. And then we'll do another one. And actually, for every single one of these, what we want to do is we also want to add a class to it, so we can style it here in a second. So let's do the class of tech logo. So we need 4 more of these. And so I've got HTML5. Let's do CSS3.png. I also want js.png. And then I like to work in React, so we got react.js.png as well as node.js.png. So let's go see what this looks like. Before I do that, let's make sure our heading is centered. So text center. I'm going to load the page, reload the page, and now we've got skills. But wait a minute. Our images are a little off. So now we're going to go back to the reason why I added a class to each of those images. So let's go in here. Let's do .techlogo. And we'll just give it a height. Let's say, someone give me a number under 100. Said under 100. Let's just do 100 pixels, see how that looks. Cool. Set. They're not centered. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. Remember how we put the skills section in there? So we want to take skills section. I'm going to give it another, again, display flex, just because I'm cheap like that. And then we're going to justify all of our content to the center. And we'll go ahead and save it, see what it looks like. Whoops. That didn't look right. So we'll do flex direction. We want this to be a column. And this isn't going to work the way I want it to work. Never mind. So we're going to skip the display flex portion. What we'll do, we'll go ahead and take this class and we'll actually make another div with that name. If I can, dot skills section, there we go. We're going to go ahead and take all of these images and put them inside the div. Then we can go ahead and use our display flex on it. Flex. Going to justify content to the center. So that should give us what we want. So we've got all of our images down there. Those are a little big, and we also want some margin around them. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's change this down to 80. 100 pixels a bit big. And then we also want a margin around all sides. Let's do 24 pixels. See how that looks. Let's go ahead and save that, and we're going to go ahead and reload the page. So looks pretty simple. So the next thing we want, so the very last thing, is our social media links and sort of how to, so the contact info. So I'm going to do a real simple contact section. There doesn't need to be much there. You can put a form in there if you want. So there's a lot of good resources online about how to do forms. You can also do just a simple email me link. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So let's do section, and we're going to give it the ID of contact. Then we need our H2 with the contact me heading. And then we're just going to put in a paragraph that says, email me at someone@example.com. Not that I don't want to give you guys my email address. I'd be perfectly willing to do that, but not on a live stream. So let's go ahead and look at what that looks like. Oh, wait a minute. So can anybody guess what we missed? Do it? Yeah, so we're missing the container, and then we're also missing one more thing. So we want this to be sort of centered on the page. So we also need that text align center, or we need that text center class. Let's go ahead and delete that. So add a container. And then we also want to add the class of text center. That'll give us some centered text. We'll come back to this here in a second just to make sure it's styled a little bit better than what we've got. But the last thing we want is we're going to want a footer. So footer, and inside of that footer we want the container again. And so for this, what I want to do is I want to have my social media links, and I want to have a copyright notice. You can put that there if you want, but typically you want to have a copyright notice if it's something that you're creating. So inside of here, we'll do a div for social icons, and then we'll do a paragraph for the copyright. So I'll just copyright. And then inside that, we're just going to do, and copy Carson, we're at 2017, Carson, McKinstry, blah, blah, blah. What that'll give us is it'll give me this 2017 Carson McKinstry copyright notice. We also want to make sure that this is aligned to the center. Make sure that's the way it is. Cool. So next thing, let's go ahead and start adding our social media icons. So two things for this. You need an anchor tag and you need an image. So for the anchor tag, it's so that each of those images will then link out to one of your social media sites. So we need the anchor, and that's just, again, for simplicity's sake, we'll just link it back to the current page. And then we need an image, and the source is going to be images / let's do the first one as Facebook.svg. And then we also need that image responsive class, as well as one of our own classes, so social icon. So we'll copy that 4 times. So I want one for my Twitter account, twitter.svg. Let's do LinkedIn, so LinkedIn, linkedin.svg, and then lastly, one for my GitHub. So github.svg. Let's go and take a look at what those look like. Again, we've got another problem. Those are humongous, so let's go ahead and fix that real quick. So we've got our outer container, so that's going to be social icons.social icons. Come back to that here in a second. And then we've got another class that just says social icon. Social icon. So for these social icons, I typically want to keep these a little smaller. You can make them bigger if you want. It doesn't particularly matter much. But let's go ahead and say these are going to be height of 24 pixels. Let's do 48. And we also need to make sure that it's centered. So we're going to do our display flex again. And we're going to justify the content to the center again. And then I know for a fact these icons are going to be a little wonky at first, just because they're all going to be smushed up together. So we also want to add a margin. And we're going to go ahead and add a margin of, say, 24 pixels. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Okay, so that's pretty much it. We've got our navigation bar. And because I added smooth scrolling at the very beginning, I can give you that code if you want it. We can smoothly scroll between sections on the page. So we've got our Jumbotron. It's got the famous hello world, as well as a small description, and then a learn more link. And we've got our project section. So we've got an image of each of the projects, plus a title, description, and the links to source code and all that. And then we've got a skills section just to sort of show off this is the stuff that I know, this is the stuff that I'm learning. And then finally we've got a contact me section, and then a social media footer. So all these styles can be changed. So that's actually where I'm headed to next. So what's next? So your next steps are going to be overwrite the stock Bootstrap styles. that is a huge thing. So when I first built my portfolio, I showed it off to a couple people, and the very first thing they said was, you need to get rid of the Bootstrap styles. They're nice, they're good for prototyping, but once you start actually trying to market yourself, it just makes it look stock, and it makes it look really not your own. So basically, so make it your own. You can add a little bit of color if you'd like. I can show you mine here in a moment. And you also need to go ahead and write some awesome copy for the descriptions for your apps, for your the description of yourself up at the very top. And then the very last thing is we're actually going to put this up on GitHub pages. So it's pretty easy. So I've actually linked a tutorial. I'll post the link to this presentation here in a minute. But I've included a tutorial on actually how to publish something to GitHub pages and actually get it on the internet for people to see. So first things first is so what I'm going to show you now is actually how to get it up onto GitHub pages. So we need our terminal. So we're going to do git status. So back to a couple weeks ago when Daniel talked to everyone about how to use git, as well as last week about how to do everything, how to properly use git to get things onto GitHub. So we've got our git status. So we've got two things that changed. So we'll want to git add everything. And then we can git commit we can go ahead and git commit, and then created our portfolio. Cool. Now, I'm actually currently on a branch of something that I was working on earlier, just sort of an example portfolio. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and git push. And remember, if you remember last week, I talked about whenever you create a new branch, if you want it up onto GitHub, you actually have to set the upstream, or else your remote branch has no idea what it should be expecting. So we're going to use the U flag, or we can use the set upstream flag. And we're going to say I want it to go to the origin, and then I want it to be this particular branch, so the demo branch. And we'll give it a second. It's going to do all the fanciness, and then it's now on GitHub. So let's go over to GitHub real quick and see what that looks like. So github.com. You go ahead and sign in. So let's go to my personal profile. So you'll see in here in my repositories, I've got this example portfolio. And in order to get this onto GitHub pages, your next step is going to be to go to settings in the repo that you want on the internet. Let me make this bigger. You'll actually scroll down to GitHub pages. Now what we want is we want to choose a source for this. So typically what you can do, what you'll want to do is you'll actually do the master branch. So I'll show you what I was working on last night when I was sort of preparing. So we'll select a source. So it's going to be a master branch, and we're going to save. Simple as that. What it will now do is it'll actually go to your master branch. It'll find your index.html file, and it'll post it. Now, what I've actually done, so the way that this works, so if you have a website on GitHub pages, typically you're going to find it at it's going to be your GitHub username, excuse the small text, .github.io. And this is my website. So it'll be at your username.github.io. So that's going to be your normal website. Now, if you create another repo, say you create another page you want to show off, something like a project you're working on, what it does is when you post something to GitHub pages, it will actually give you a subroute, which is the same name as the repo. So if I were to so what I've got mine set up for now is that actually redirects to my own personal domain. But this works just the same. So we've got carsonmckinstry.com/example portfolio. Pretty much what we were working on a minute ago, right? So if we scroll down, you can see, and this is what I was working on last night. I added some more styles, but that's a little bit more nitpicky than for an hour-long presentation. But so you can pretty much see an example, just a portfolio doesn't take long to put up onto the internet. Take an hour out of your day, put anything up on the internet. You don't have to have all the projects there yet, but put the code in place so that you can start playing with it, start coming up with your own style. You don't have to do this layout if you don't want to. This looks very stock. At least it looks stock to me. Yeah, basically just have fun with it. So does anyone have any questions at this point? So I'll scroll through this. Let me actually go back to the code real quick. Let's go to the skills section. So actually what I did was I did the skills section as a style by itself. So let's go ahead here. So you have this display flex and then justify content. And then what you saw me doing, so for the tech logo was what you might be talking about. So what that does is it'll actually let me do the height and I'll set the margin. So there's a lot of stuff in here that's not going to be stock Bootstrap. You just have to get used to that. There is a lot of stock Bootstrap. And I'll show you where to actually find out about all that. Okay, so let's go to Bootstrap, getbootstrap.com. Can you guys read that? Well, now you can. Well, let's do one more. Let's go to the top of the page. So when you get to the Bootstrap website, you'll get this. Make sure to change your version number to 3. You can play with 4 if you'd like. But the main thing we're looking at, main thing that we'll want to start working with is going to be the component section and the CSS section. So the components, right here on the right-hand side, we've got glyphicons, we've got drop-downs, we've got nav bars, we've got labels, we've got the Jumbotron, a lot of different stuff that we can play with. So some of the things we used the Jumbotron. I think that was really it. So on the other side of things, we've got CSS. So the CSS, this is where you're going to get all of your utility classes. So text alignment, the grid system, pretty much how any of that stuff works. So if you want to read up more on how to use Bootstrap, how it works, how it sort of functions, this would be the perfect place to go. So we've got this grid system. So this is a little how it works. So you've got a container or a container fluid, depending on how you want it to lay out. Within that, you've got a row, and then within that, you've got your columns. The columns can be any width from 1 to 12, so it actually splits them up into 12 columns. And you can say, I want this to be 4 columns on a small screen. I want this to be 4 columns on an extra small screen. I want this to span the entire thing on a large screen. And you can do up to 12, so long as the column numbers actually add up to 12, you're good to go. If you do more than that, sometimes it will wrap, sometimes it won't. Depends on the browser, depends on what you're doing. So it's always a good idea to go ahead and add extra rows if you need them. So that's the grid system. The other thing we use this typography section. So you'll see, that's not where I wanted, pardon me. Buttons. That was the other thing that we used. So every button, every A tag, every button tag, and every input tag can take this button class as well as a button color class. So we've got default. Let me actually show you real quick. So we've got default, we've got primary, we've got a success one, we've got an info, a warning, and a danger. And then just a standard link. See, what else did we talk about with this? And then with our images, so we talked about responsive images, or this image responsive class. What that does is that actually lets you say, okay, I want this to fill up whatever div it's in. And we actually saw that here a second ago. And what it'll do is as you make the screen smaller, make the screen bigger, it'll actually respond to that and sort of change the way it looks. Okay, so I think that's about all I've got for you guys. So let me, yeah. So we want to thank Techlahoma one more time, as well as Starspace 46. And then, as always, we want to thank freeCodeCamp for basically bringing us together. You can find me online at carsonmckinstry.com, like I just showed you, as well as pretty much everywhere on the internet with this at Carson McKinstry. And then also, if you're not in our Slack channel, and I think most of you guys are, we're at techlahoma.org/spaces. There's a Slack sign-up feature there. We're just in the hashtag freeCodeCamp group. We also want to make sure to go ahead and check out the code of conduct. Just always a good reminder to make sure and pay attention to that. Techlahoma has it. Just some rules for the community. So yeah, so any questions? No? Cool. Well, I think we're done.